Hey, it's Steve Lindsley. Welcome to video number 2 of Matt's Hang Tables. In the first video, we made quite a bit of progress. So if you haven't watched that yet, why don't you hop on back to my YouTube channel and take a look at that. In this video, we're going to go ahead and make the drawers, put the tables together, put some stain on them, and then put some finish on them. So then they'll be done. So with any luck, they'll come out okay, which is pretty easy thing for me to say because they're already finished and delivered. So I know they came out all right. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how I finish up Matt's end tables. All right, let's get caught up here again. I got the shelf fitted in one of the pieces. It went into that dado that we cut along the side, and it's going to be flush with the top. It's a little, flush with the bottom piece here. This is a little bit proud at the moment, but I'll take care of that. So that'll all be flushed. I had to notch the legs to get that shelf to fit right. And what it looked like was, this is let's see how that would go in there like that. So it'd be a little bit backwards for you, but it's notched down. It's the width of the shelf notched down to where this bottom piece is. So I'm sure that's about as clear as mud, but this one would go on like this. So that's the bottom. So anyway, that's what the intent anyway. So that was the one. I got the others laid out here. I got it all laid out where I want it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the hollow chisel mortiser to cut the back here so that I get a nice straight piece on the back. And then I'll just use a handsaw and some chisels to clean up to cut the front piece out and clean it up. The only thing it really has to do, it has to fit over the shelf. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go to the mortiser and cut out this back piece here. The oscillating spindle sander does a good job of cleaning up these curves. I do have a vacuum, and I did turn it on, but unless you hook the vacuum to the back of the sander, it doesn't do a whole heck of a lot of good. So I couldn't figure out why I was getting so much sawdust, but anyway, I figured it out eventually. Duh. I put a 3/16 inch roundover bit in the router table, and that's what I'm using to knock off the corners of the table. So I gave it a nice finished look and kind of concealed that joint where I glued those pieces to the sides of the legs. All right, we're getting ready to put some finish on the top of this piece. The finishing regiment's going to be going to use this cherry minwax stain. That's going to be the color. This is one of the shelves where I've already stained and put some finish on it. It makes it a nice light colored brown, so that actually works pretty nice. So I like that. Once the stain dries, I'm going to put on several coats of this water-based high-performance satin by General Finishes. Now the stain is oil-based, and this is water-based, so there's a question as whether you can put the one over top of the other. And the General Finishes site says you can do that as long as you let the oil finish dry for 72 hours. So I'm going to put this on now, and then 3 or 4 days from now when I finally get back to it, I'm going to put the top coat on. On the rest of the piece, I brushed on the top coat. On the top, I'm going to spray it on. So the idea then is just to get some finish on this piece. This is the bottom of this part. So All I would do is I just keep it stirred up well, just make sure everything is mixed up the way it's supposed to be. And then I'm just using a rag, and it's a matter of putting it on, letting it set. I'm not going to do the sides or the ends. I'll do those when I flip the piece over. So you don't have to be fussy with this. It's just a matter of getting some coverage on it. What I do is I've been doing is letting the putting the stain on, letting it set for 2 minutes. I did some test pieces, and it really didn't change it whether I let it set for 2 minutes or 10 minutes. The oak is only going to absorb so much, so 2 minutes turned out to be the same amount of time. So I just put on a coat, let it set for a couple of minutes, and then we'll wipe it off. So we'll give that a couple of minutes just to set there. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. I'm gonna just take a rag and wipe off the excess stain. All right, now we'll flip it over. And the process is pretty much the same. So I got fingerprints on it. I'll wipe those off. Process is pretty much the same on this side, except this time I'm going to do the edges in the end. I sanded this piece to 180, except the ends, which is end grain, I sanded to 400 to get a nice, so they wouldn't get too dark when I put the stain on. Okay, we'll let that set for a couple of minutes, and then we'll wipe it off. All right, it's been a couple of minutes, so we're going to go ahead and wipe this off. All right, there we go. That's how I stained this piece, and we'll go ahead and spray on some top coat after this dries for 72 hours. Time for a little assembly. I'm going to use a Titebond 3 or Titebond Ultimate on gluing up the front and back pieces. So it's just a matter of putting some glue in the mortises and a little bit on the tenon. I didn't put a lot. I didn't want to deal with a bunch of squeeze out. This happens to be the front piece, so it has the drawer opening top and bottom, and the drawer top has that dovetail on it. Would have been nice if I would have kept it in the camera, but there you go, you get a better idea of it right there. So it's just a matter of putting some glue on it and putting everything together and throwing on some clamps and then letting it dry for a couple hours. After the front and back had sufficient time to dry, it was time to put the sides together. This time I'm using the hide glue for a little extra open time. It was a little tricky. I tried putting the clamps on it to hold the spindles in place, and all that got me was one that came apart and spindles were in everywhere. So I just resorted to the old favorite blue tape and taped them together so that the spindles stayed where they were supposed to be, and then put the bottom in, and then if I would have adjusted the camera right, you would have seen me put the other, the back on the table. But unfortunately, I didn't do that. I probably had it right before I put it on those little riser blocks there, but then after that, it kind of got out of the picture. So sorry about that, but it was just a matter of putting glue on it and putting it together and sticking a couple of clamps on it. After the stain on the top had plenty of time to dry, I sprayed on 3 coats of the high performance. I put them on, it doesn't look like it here, but I put them on fairly heavy, and then I sanded it back with some 320, and for the final coat I brushed it on, and it came out with a nice smooth finish on the top. Now that the tables are all glued up, it's time to start thinking about building the drawers. I made some drawer guides and just screwed them into the sides there. Just a matter of taking some, see if I get that on there, matter of taking a couple of pieces and gluing them together into an L shape. I sized this piece here so that it gives me a little bit of a reveal along the side. Rather than try and measure them all, I just took my little 6-inch ruler and just made everything so that it was flush. So that's like 1/16 of an inch or so. So it was easier than trying to measure each one of them. So I got these screwed in. I also cut some pocket holes in the inside here to screw the top on. So we'll do that. There's a screw that goes in the front here, and there's a hole in this rail. I'm not quite sure. I showed it earlier before, but gives you a spot to put the screwdriver up through there so you can screw that screw in. So anyway, that's the drawer guides. I'll put a couple of kickers on the top here to keep the drawer from tipping out when you pull it out. I haven't cut those to size yet, but I'll put them on, and truthfully, I'll probably just pocket hole them to the front and back. The pocket holes will be on the top. The top will be on it. You'll never see it. So next thing to do is build a couple of drawers. Okay, here's a couple of pieces for the one of the drawers. I got one of the sides and in the front. I'm using, just like the drawer guides, I'm using some maple for the drawer sides. The bottom and the back of the drawer will also be maple. I don't do a lot of dovetails, so I always look for a way to it's easier for me to do them. And I found an article in Fine Woodworking a few years ago where you use a bandsaw and a router to do the dovetails. So it requires a couple of jigs. So here's one that I made. It's a 1/6 slope. Use this one to cut the pins or cut the tails on the bandsaw, and then use this one to hold the front vertically so you can do the pins. So it works pretty well. I did a test piece here. I don't know if we can see it, but anyway, it came out. To get a little bit closer maybe. So it came out pretty good for my first one that I've done in a long time. What you do is you just lay out I just laid out the pins or tails, so I give myself a half pin on each side and a 1/4-inch pin in the middle, and there'll be 2 tails. So I'll show you what I'm doing when I do it. The sides are longer than they needed to be. I'll cut them to length after I get the front dovetailed. It'll be half-line dovetails on the front, of course, and then through dovetails on the back. So we're going to go ahead and get the bandsaw out. I'll show you how I cut the tails, and then we'll do the pins in that piece, and it'll be good to go. Here I'm using a little dovetail guide that I mentioned in a previous clip. Just a matter of taking the one that I did the layout on and setting the bandsaw up, and then just cutting all the dovetails on one side, flipping it over, moving the fence just to line it up to get them to where you need them, and then it's just a matter of cutting those out. So it actually works out pretty well. Well, after I got the tails cleaned out, I used them to lay out the pins on the front part of the drawer. Just a matter of lining it up and using an X-Acto knife, and I went over it with a pencil just so I could see the line a little bit better. So that gives you a pretty accurate layout doing it that way. I used the router to clean out the waste on the thing. Of course, you really can't see it here, so I'm not quite sure this clip is all that valuable, but it's just a matter of using the router and a straight bit to remove most of the waste and then finishing it up with a chisel. And here we are after I routed it out. So now we'll just do a little chisel work and clean all this up. Okay, it's the moment of truth. Let's see how we did here. Not too bad. I'll take that any day of the week. Okay, I got the parts for one of the drawers here. I showed a video on how I cut the half-blind dovetails in the front. On the back, I use a through dovetail. Unfortunately, I neglected to film that, so sorry about that. For the bottom, I wanted to use a more traditional bottom rather than a piece of plywood. So I glued up some maple boards here. I did bevel the back edges. I didn't normally, traditionally you would use a hand plane to get that all the way down to where the tongue fit in the groove, but I went ahead and cut a little tongue with the table saw. I don't have a hand plane big enough to do all that. All I really have is a block plane. So then I did use a block plane to make a bevel around the front and on the sides. There's no bevel in the back. So we're going to go ahead and dry fit this thing together. When I do glue it up, I'm going to use this the hide glue to give me a little extra open time. So take one of the sides, make sure that I get everything the way that it's supposed to be. So this is the groove goes on the bottom, so this thing would go on this side. That goes in there like that. The back piece is shorter because the bottom slides in underneath of it, and then I'll put a screw up through the bottom to hold it in place. So there's that side. So we'll go ahead and slide the bottom in. There we go. And put on the other side piece. All right. Now to clamp the thing up, I made these little cauls. You can't really probably see them too good, but they're. I just took some pieces of scrap oak and put some grooves in it so that it would, when I put it on here, it'll fit on the dovetail, and it'll actually push the dovetail together when I put the clamp on it. So we'll put these on here. Let's see. Get them on the right way so that they hit on the center of the dovetail. I got a couple more for the front, and we'll do those. Just using some blue tape to hold them where I want them to be. And then that'll help squeeze everything together when I put it in the clamps. So let's see, we got a couple of clamps. That one decided not to cooperate. Stay in there where you belong. There we go. Do the front one. That one's not cooperating for some reason. Give it a little persuasion. There we go. I'm sure that was good on your ears. Anyway. All right. So that's basically the glue up for the piece. I'm not going to put any glue on the bottom. But the way the boards are, if there's any expansion, it's going to go front to back. Won't be side to side. So what I'll do is I'll drill an oversized hole, screw that on there. We'll just make sure everything is square. So it's a little over 23 1/4, and that's a little over 23 1/4, so it's nice and square. So what I'll do is I'll take it all apart, and then I'll put put some glue on the dovetails. I want enough to hold it together, but I don't want to have to deal with a bunch of squeeze out on the inside or whatever. So I'll glue those up, and then we're getting pretty much done. I'll need to sand the outside, sand the top, level everything up, sand the front. I did drill the hole for the knob. So then once those are done, they'll be ready to finish into the drawer or into the tables. So that's how I'm going to put the drawers together. All right, here's one of the drawers I'll put together. What I did on the bottom is once I got it in, I put a screw in the back on an oversized hole, so if the bottom needs to expand and contract, it can go back this way. So that should be good. I also went ahead and put some dye on the front of the drawer. This is a combination of 1 part cinnamon and 1 part espresso from General Finishes. Probably hard to see in the camera, would be my guess. It's the same dye I used on the Hope Chest project, but it looks a little different on here because this is white oak and not cherry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish the inside of the outside of the drawer. I'm going to use this spray shellac. It's de-wax shellac from Zinsser. Bought it at the box store. The good news is it goes on easy and it dries fast. On the front, I'm going to seal this up with the shellac, but the finish coat's going to be the high performance that I've put on the rest of the piece. So it's just a matter of spraying a light coat on and then letting that dry and then doing that a couple of times, and we'll be good to go. So let me put some on this piece. Having it on a Lazy Susan makes things a little bit easier. And we'll put some on the outside. Some on the coat on the front. Okay. We'll let that dry, and then once it dries a little bit, I'll flip it over and do the inside. We'll probably put a couple of coats on the outside and then maybe 3 or 4 on the inside, depending on how it goes. I'll do some scuff sanding between coats to make sure everything's nice and flat. So, all right, we're getting close to the end of this project. I do have some knobs for the front that I'll show later when I get ready to put this thing all together. So that's pretty much it for the drawers. Next thing will be the final assembly and some pictures of the finished product. Well, here's Matt's tables all finished up. I put some dye on the drawers and installed a couple of knobs that I bought from House of Antique Hardware, I think was the name of it. They're reproduction mission style knobs. They look really nice. Let's zoom in a little closer and take a closer look at these nice tables. Well, as you saw in the video, I did half blind dovetails on the front, full dovetails in the back. They got some nice spindles on the side of the tables there. The drawers right on the maple drawer slides. I like the different color on the front of the drawer, and like I said, the knobs are from House of Antique Hardware. Kind of a hammered, coppered look. They're really very nice. The grain on the woods is very pleasing. I really enjoy using white oak. Quarter sawn white oak really comes out nice. So overall, this was it was a fun project. It was challenging and took a little bit longer than I thought it was going to, but overall I think they came out real nice. Okay, that's how I wrapped up Matt's end tables. It was certainly an exercise in mortise and tenon. There was 46 mortises in each table, which, if my math is correct, 2 carry the 1, that's 92. 92 mortises total, which means there was also 92 tenons. So it was fun. They came out great, and Matt really liked them, which is the final test of any project you make. So if the recipient is pleased with it, then it was a successful project. So it really came out good. Back in Gustav Stickley days in the early 1900s, there was no such thing as end tables or coffee tables. So if Mr. Stickley could see my tables, I hope he would be happy with my version of a Stickley end table. So I thank everybody for watching. I thank all my subscribers. I appreciate everybody that subscribes. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down here someplace and hit that bell, and you'll be notified when I put up new videos. I'll put some pictures up here in the end. In the meantime, until the next video, take care, be safe, and we'll see you again soon.